we invite we invite our visiting artists to also do an artist talk at the end of their time here. So this is our last artist talk of the year, and we are going to be featuring Jenna Tessler and Sarah Gonzales Busse. Sarah is going to go first. She's visiting us from Texas. She's been here for the whole month of October. She has been totally killing it in the textiles zone, the print shop zone of Alchemy, doing all kinds of amazing work with botanical dye, and I just don't even understand it. It's so amazing and scientific and wonderful. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this started and forgive the technical moments of this moment. But it should all be okay. I've done this before. It's just one of those things. It's so perfect. And yeah, please welcome Sarah. Yeah.
Hello. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some themes that I'm working on right now and that have gone through my work. And I'll just get started. That then is culminating in the work in progress that I started here. That'll also continue through the next 18 months when I go back home. So a little bit about myself. I am a painter and sculptor who also studied classics, and myth has always captivated me in the way that it helps us make sense of things we can't make sense of. And what that's meant for me most recently is in thinking and raising kids, which I have 3 of, how we think through things like how we translate to them their experience in this very digital world, and try to connect that to climate change and nature, which they don't get enough of at all in their daily lives, which will really I don't live near a lake. I feel like I work at getting enough of in my daily life. I definitely got enough of living in the forest for a month in a different way. So my work has always, I originally was much more into painting and monoprinting with oil paint. And I always have had women and children as messengers in landscapes. And so I've always had this mix of kind of ambiguous landscapes that kind of look like some kind of action is taking place on them or time is happening. And so the brushstrokes and mark making has always been very important to me as indicators of that, with the figure kind of somehow either lost in that mix or very active in that mix. And so that is where I started way a long time ago when I first got my degree in art. And then I took a very, very long pause. And that picture, I add this painting here because I completed this painting literally the week I found out that I was pregnant with my first kid. And then, so I call it my long pause because I wasn't doing art in the same way. I didn't want to have, I didn't have a separate studio to where, from my house. I didn't really want to deal with oil paints. I started to get really nauseated actually by oil paints and solvents as well when I was pregnant. And so I looked to use safer alternatives, what were known as non-toxic safer alternatives. Those actually also gave me respiratory distress and started to aggravate my skin. So that was just dreadful and wasn't working really at all. And so I kind of just stopped everything related to that. But I didn't stop creating things. So at the same time, my mother-in-law, who's in the back row, suggested maybe I would be interested in picking up knitting, and because babies notorious for needing things. And so this hat, so I did actually take to knitting and relearn crochet, and actually really, really, really liked it a lot, and got into specifically how patterns. I also have always been into computers and have done some web design and coding on the side. And so I really liked how creating a pattern in knitting and crocheting was very much like that. Like you learn the different stitches and you work them together and they make this thing. So I got really into pattern making of things. And I also, so these pictures represent kind of my long pause other activities, which were classroom gardens, because I've always been into botanicals and getting those back to where kids are again reconnecting with nature. And that's kind of a thing that's understood as happening in home and at school, and that people understand that it's not like just that it's actually a way to understand everything, science, to learn science better, to know what you're interacting with in nature better, to know what your food is better. So, and then also this bottom corner picture is of a mindfulness program that I helped get going at my kids' school in the morning, because their school went under a lot of construction. And so they were in portables and having to deal with technology for a lot of time. And in the aftermath of that, of just like bulldozers and everything closed in the school, and they lost a beautiful garden that they had. So these projects were all part of bringing that back and kind of bringing some balance to what had been really, really chaotic living for kids for a couple of years. And the kids really, really took to it. So I should back up. So when I first graduated from college, I've always had this struggle between or split between just doing my art practice and doing activism. And that at first, when I first graduated, I went into national service and very much away from and community service and very much away from art. Except that every now and then we would do a fun mural project with the kids that we were working with. And then I went and worked as studio manager for an artist, and that got me reinvigorated in my own practice until my long pause. So as I was doing these kind of more activist activities again, I was kind of bridging, not realizing it at the time, my painting and my sculpture, not as a separate thing, but in finding textiles, I was finding kind of that, how they could work together. And I didn't know that at the time, but know it now as I've been able to come back to it. So when I first returned to making anything, I had already sworn off oil paint because of everything. So I was like, all right, I'm going to learn how to deal with acrylic. It's the safe, non-toxic thing. And so I went into learning print and paper making, which were both two things that I had not had there was no print studio at my college. And women and children quickly came back into the narrative. I always try to, so this piece, I always try to avoid obvious types of male gaze, but I also like, have a very domestic life, right? So I like this balance of like, but I also feel like mothers are very, very much invisible, become invisible in a lot of ways. And so this is kind of my ideas were, how do I get this across? And I kind of feel like you're the center of the story, but everything that's happening around you is kind of more about the chaos that happens around you. And the chaos can sometimes be more interesting. So everyone's like, oh, those are wonderful marbles that she has lost out of her head. Let's go look at those really closely and in depth. And you're like missing the narrative. And then the pandemic happened. And so I was just starting to bridge things, and these works. So I've also had my kids as my captive figures that I use every now and again in my in prints and etchings. And with the pandemic, I really felt like it's very interesting to have this digital world and have them just be kids, right? So they're just like, they can't make sense of what's going on. But there is, again, like they send all of these messages out and receive all of these messages. And so these were my COVID portraits with ancient syringe etchings of what on earth could this seem like to them, of you know, everything that that is floating around in terms of misinformation about this unknown thing that's acting on them. And I have them as icons just because it's kind of a running joke that everybody, to me, it's a joke that everyone, you know, thinks their children are angels. So I like to put them in these kind of chaotic, I mean, they are, they really, really are. But so I like to put them in these kind of chaotic situations as the icons, just to also get across how kind of how we illuminate them, and but we are not, like, we have no idea what is or isn't hitting with them. So and when I returned to making, I also had a pull very much of not having enough time to feel like I could make, like, you know, have enough time with my family life of raising 3 kids, and also have enough time to do full-on installations or bodies of work. So I went in a lot of different directions to try to figure out, where is this direction? Where do I want to go? That's not oil painting, which a lot of people still think is crazy, that no, my oil painting practice, they're like, just paint again. But so I was working with textiles and wanted to switch to natural dyes. I've done some work with paper making and liked how paper could become a kind of a sculptural blend, and textiles can become a sculptural blend. So again, I do all of the painting and printing, but then it can also become something else, a 3D object, and going back and forth between functional objects and prints, or something that bridges the two. And so lately I've been putting together different printed pieces of textile that are all natural dyed. I switched during the pandemic to entirely natural dyes, and also going between more what look, you know, what are more like my painted work would be, where it's kind of an interior thing, and just very pop images and very fun activist series. So here you can see kind of an example of some of those together. And also joining my work, I like this balance of understanding very, very feminine things, like these are doilies up top here, and what it means to have something that have the soldiers are there as, are they something that makes you feel protected, or are they something that feels like a threat? And so I like to have these two things together that kind of make you question, how do I feel? Does that feel like this is safe? It's very, you know, structurally boxed, safe grid. And it has all of the hallmarks of laciness and curtains. And then there's this soldier guy there who's supposedly a protector, right? And then on the bottom, the one thing I really liked in natural dyes is the different tonality that I can get when all of these are on reclaimed sheet too, that I use. The tonality that I can get from where the material starts and the interact and nuance that happens with the botanicals and the tannin, and how that comes out in really different ways every time. And I've liked this in terms of thinking from a mindfulness perspective too, of how I can have an addition and then add on to it later. So these ones on the bottom, I recently did the woman before, and the resist backgrounds before I came here, and then I'll be adding hand stitching and embroidery onto them as a way to kind of think through. And it's a nice thing to be able to just pick up and be like, what is she thinking? What's going on around her? So I like that idea of, I've always liked open edition or mono prints more so than everybody gets 20 of the exact same piece. So then I came here and I had my goals, which were, I have 1 month. I wanted to use all fresh botanicals. I wanted to work larger scale, And my two guiding ideas are that climate change is not a myth, but that myths create culture. So these are the work that I'm doing here is part of, again, an 18-month series of work that I'm calling the Atlantean series that I've kind of been working up to. And the first thing here is learning all new botanicals. So actually foraging and working from fresh. At home, I tend to work from standardized, dried, powdered dyes and extracts that are through a company that, well, through a couple of companies that are known to specialize in those in botanicals from across the world and in North America. And so my challenge here was to just go out and see what colors I could find all around me. And so you'll see a sample on there, the other side there, of a lot of the colors that I was able to get while I was here.
Can you tell us what those dye baths were? Do you remember?
These dye baths, the blue is black bean, this is bracken, and at the bottom there is rhubarb root. So I had a mix of kitchen things and forage things. Yes.
You were so confident in your tests and making your own dye baths out of packing things. I had no idea that that was like a challenge for you. Have you done that as well, but just not as like a principle, or like have you done foraged plant?
I have not done
Wow.
forage stuff.
Well
Right.
done.
Thank you.
You have so much confidence
Yeah.
in the process that it seemed like you've been doing it for. I mean, I'm surprised that you started botanical dye around the pandemic. Your whole life, you have so much knowledge about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, kudos.
Yeah, I'm always still just I learned a lot while here, because it's when you're working with powders and extracts, you're looking at like 5% to 30% of weight of a thing. So it's like these very small amounts. And then with the botanicals, it was literally like a pot full of bracken that I cut, you know. So it was very much a large, and not only was I scaling up the works, but I had to scale up what I was collecting. What I also really liked here, and what I'm definitely taking back, is the bracken, the seasonality of the things is that you're catching them at a point where you're not like, I didn't take away new growth from anything. The bracken is at the end of its cycle. It's going to go dormant. Blackberry is at the end of its cycle and drying and for the winter, and it's also an invasive weed that nobody really minds getting rid of. So that was a really nice thing to do here. Whereas, you know, at home, I don't want to like, I can't like go steal things, you know, off of like, well, I can steal cochineal, like nobody would mind, but it actually takes a lot more processing than most people know to get it ready to be a permanent dye. But so that's what was really exciting here, is to go back and learn kind of what I already know. I garden at home, and so I know kind of the cycle of some things of their seasons in Texas. And so it's really nice to know that, you know, you're just kind of clearing out the stuff when it's supposed to be cleared out. You're not like taking anything that's going to be producing at the time. So that was that's been really fun to start to get into here. And then so I've known about the sea star wasting disease and felt like they were my fun indicator species here. And so I have my little sea star people organized on my large knot flags fields. Jenna and I talked back and forth about, she's like, are you making flags? And I'm like, well, they're going to look like flags. So they are the flags of flowers and roots and the star people. So they are flag-ish. So this was what I got installed. And this is the beginning of the Atlantean series. So I have my sea star here that was that actually ended up looking very piñata like, which you know, coming from South Texas, I totally don't mind. I really actually like that worked out that way. Made of dyed and reclaimed yarn, fabric yarn, and the pillow. So the Atlantean series starts where the pillow is listening to the starfish, and hopefully I'll be able to put this where I can install it somewhere back home in a school. The idea is to gather climate stories also from kids of their understanding of anything that's happening with sea creatures. And then the pillow is slowly going to transform in form from an ordinary comfort object into a something else. And so I like taking that, like Maria's was saying, the transforming of just the botanicals into dye and pigment and them becoming something else. And so the Atlantean series, this part of it is listening to those indicator species and what are they telling us. And why Atlantis is because I feel like it is very much about, it says a lot about how we have, we either fail to be able to know how to take action in reconnecting to nature in terms of climate change, or and if we can, we kind of put too much weight on and utopianism on our individual actions versus what we can accomplish collectively. And then we have like not a lot of ways to get it across very well, I don't feel, to kids that aren't terrifying. So for me, a lot of the time is like myth making for my kids, and in terms of how to not terrify them about a world of doom that they would inherit, but instead be like, we're going on this adventure. We're hoping we don't end up with you completely submerged underwater with none of it drinkable, but here we go. And so that's basically where this is starting, and how I've
Other
incorporated
question.
textiles.
Is the pillow like going to like, is that sculpture actually transforming into something else? Like in
Yes.
6 months, you've got
I've got an idea already.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
So this is the pillow start as a comfort object.
Interesting. So you're gonna kind of document it through time, and that's gonna be the piece of art.
Yes.
Cool.
So yeah, everything I got, I got to exhibit here is really the beginning. The field of star people will also get embroidery that goes that speaks to more about the sea star wasting disease and which of them are then just are present and on the cloth, and the other that are the memory of where they were. And I'm ready for Q&A. Or here's some of the process along the way. You can see some Western hemlock bark in there, the modern fixing process, and a lot of the botanical trials that happened with middle schoolers, for me to also know what colors were working and how to get there. Yes.
What do you use for the fixing process?
It's a mix of wheat bran and chalk that is a modern dunging solution.
Of what?
Wheat bran and chalk.
Wheat bran.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the Atlantean series and how I was especially struck by you talking about like children coming and it being this like collaborative project where they're telling their myths and stories to
the pillow. Yes.
Have you thought about the possibility of recording any of the stories?
I need to figure a way that I have to decide if they're going to be recorded or if I want them to write out their stories. I sometimes really like kids writing out stories more, so I think I'll probably collect them that way. Just because I also like that, I mean, in this very exposed digital age of everything being recorded and posted, I kind of like these focusing on spaces that are more intimate and private, but where we share stories. And so that's also why it starts as a pillow. A lot of the other parts that I want to create over the 18 months have to do with spaces where we tell stories, like camping spaces or reading nooks or bedtime area. And so that's kind of following all the way through in that. And so maybe I would be that I actually even, just have them leave it under the pillow for me. Something like that.
Like
toothbrush style.
I'm intrigued about what you said about children, not frightening them. I didn't raise my children during a time where they had to be much afraid. If we hid under desk, we were trained to hide under desks if there was a nuclear bomb. And that's about the limit of where the danger in our kids' lives were. It was. But are you finding that children are especially frightenable about these things like
I think that there's a balance between, again, because there's so much more access to information that they through media of all types, that it becomes quickly more overwhelming. Like your amount of as a child of what you were exposed to was very much measured and paced. And now, like my oldest son, I have no control over what stories he sees on the internet and what's coming to him on a daily basis. He tells me about it. And I can say, you know, that I can measure my response of how much it should or shouldn't affect him, you know. But so I feel like that's kind of the essential difference is just more of a quicker retelling of especially around weather and things like that. So I guess that's where, and then there is my husband's a teacher of middle schoolers, so I get to hear this. I get to hear about kids all the time. They have noticed amongst the population that they work with that there's, especially with social media, they have a reluctance to do anything individually outside of a group because of the fear of being bullied online or recorded without their consent and having it posted, and that they only find out about it after the fact. And so they've seen this in kind of social gatherings where like nobody wants to look the fool necessarily. They're willing to in drama, but not necessarily in actual social gatherings. And so I guess I don't, in that sense, there's definitely a broader sense of anxiety about just how to be coming out of the pandemic. Yeah.
I'm curious about your process of leaving painting because it was making you sick. And then do you feel like exploring these other, like this botanical guy direction has like influenced the content of the like activism or ideas behind your work and being about climate change and stuff? Has that like come to you and then it lines up well with botanical dye, or do you feel like exploring botanical dye has influenced the concept of your artwork to be more about climate change? Does that question make sense?
Right. Yeah, it does. I think I always had a sense of time of kind of a turbulence of landscape. And so I think that the botanical dye actually, and I always had this really weird divide between things I would do in sculpture tended to be much more kind of didactic and pointing out, and things I did in painting tended to be much more interior, figurative narrative. And so in that sense, I think the two come together well in a way that botanicals just make me aware of. And definitely, you know, getting to have it be a direct connection of what I grow possibly myself, or go forage. And so knowing that I'm getting out into nature and everything is dependent on weather and in gathering, it just helps me stay grounded to what's present at the moment and what's really going on, I guess, in your very local environment, is a way to say, again, versus the, you know, what you're hearing about from all sides, or what you aren't able to control. And I think the interesting thing to me about climate change is how I think that, like, again, my didactic side that can get into wanting to be kind of more propaganda engaged even, is that people get very offended, and if you want to just make a pretty obvious statement. And I think again that that's because we lack a way to tell ourselves it's going to be okay. We don't have a way that we know to prepare. And so that's kind of also what I like about that in particular. Like, you can't, like, nobody can prepare well for, hurricanes that are going to be worse than any one that ever came before it. Like, they just don't know how to deal. So denial is a very great way, and aggressive denial, I guess, is a very great way that some people go about it. But I think it's kind of that we need to be reaching more for a connection that helps us understand, what is actually happening to nature around us and how we impact it or don't in very direct ways.
Well, thank you.
It was really a pleasure to watch you work for the month and spend time like you.
It really was. Thank you for that artist talk. That was amazing. Thank you so much. We're just gonna go right into Jenna's talk. Jenna is a photographer who's been working away in the dark room. She really has just brought so much life into our darkroom space over the past month, and has taught, just like Sarah, has youth mentorships, adult level classes, and has just also reoriented the Alchemy staff to the darkroom, which is really exciting and fun and just so great. So we're really excited to hear what Jenna has to say. And all right, go for it, Jenna.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone, the one person who's online. I'm Jenna, and I'm maybe gonna start this talk differently than most artists would. Even though this talk is about centering me and my artwork, I actually don't like to be at the center of attention. So I'm gonna redirect some of that attention back onto you. Don't be scared, I promise. So I want you to finish this sentence in your head. In my life, I create. So just take a moment. Take some time to think about how you would finish this sentence. Maybe the answer jumps out at you most obviously. I'm Jenna, and I create photographs. Or I'm Maria, and I create sculptures. I'm Glenn, I create music. I create pottery. Or maybe there are a few ways you could answer this one statement of I create, and it takes on a list form. Or maybe you feel completely stumped because you think, what do I create? I'm not a creative person. I'm not an artist. And what if I told you, even the most self-doubting people, that they are in fact an artist, because we all have the capacity to create something and are creating all the time, whether or not we're aware of it. Creative acts are living all around us in the choices we make every day. As humans, we innately practice creative problem solving to navigate our lives. So now that you're an artist, you heard it here first, I told you so, think up some of your most recent creative acts. What were they, and how did they make you feel? Are you still resisting this title of the artist? My intent is not to force this onto you, but only expand your mind and to get you thinking, to ask yourself what it would mean if we saw the art in everyone, including ourselves, rather than only the people who claim the name capital A artist. I had a participant in one of my classes. I taught a mindfulness-based photography class. And after our 4 hours together, learning and reflecting, he started the class as what he would consider a part-time landscaper, and now declares that weed whacking is an art, and he is an artist. So this is at the basis of the neuroarts field, which is expanding our brains, thinking about what we consider art and the narrow definition of art that we have in our society, and how even the act of weed whacking can be an art and is activating that part of our brain. So neuroarts and neuroaesthetics is something that I've been really interested in recently, and can talk more about that at some point if people are interested. So I'm sitting at the back of a classroom at the Santa Fe Photographic Workshops in New Mexico, where I'm an assistant for a course, The Expressive Landscape. Eddie Solway is the teacher. He's a landscape photographer local to Santa Fe, and he's now a mentor figure to me in my photography. And he announces to his 10-person student body, "I wonder what would happen if." This is an introduction to all kinds of photographs, to making art. And this statement has been a through line in my creative practice. It was realized in that moment of hearing the words, "what if?" I'm constantly asking myself, I wonder what would happen if? This question allows me to remain playful. Art can be taught to make people rigid, thinking that there is a right and wrong way, or a good and bad. So I ask myself, how can I practice non-attachment to the end result or product in art and in the art that we see in the world? With this question, curiosity carries me through in my work. So if you couldn't already gather, I really like questions. Many questions of which I don't have answers to, or questions that beg further questions. So I'm thinking about this Artist Talk series, Artist Statement. I couldn't help but ask, what is my statement? And I think I have many answers to that question. So, let's start in my childhood. We know so much of who we are stems from this place of childhood. I'm on a plane and we are en route to home. For me, this is the Bay Area, California. I'm given the middle seat. I say this like it's a privilege. The middle seat is notoriously undesired. My brother Scott likes to look out the window, and my dad needs to, quote, stretch his legs. And I'm small, so naturally that means middle seat. I was in the middle of a lot. This was me. My dad can't stay awake for long and takes to resting his eyes with the soundtrack of a movie playing through his headphones. This leaves me to entertaining Scott, my older brother. Our age difference 3 years. Scott was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum in his preschool years, around 5 years old. I'm never explicitly told that Scott's disability. Somehow I just always knew, just as I always knew that I was the normal one, and somehow lesser than and also greater than. So on the plane ride home, we sit around the PC laptop, piecing together sentences and dragging in photos from the library of images from our vacation. I'm helping him to write a report that he can bring to school the next day. I watch him click through the photos, captivated, hyper-focused, and the inattentiveness made everything around him an easy distraction, but photos of us and him he could really focus on. And I knew this was a special language, the visual language. And I believe my interest in photography started here. So I want to travel through a bit of my artist history and highlight a few projects. All of them are very different, but with the underlying message of using art to express what feels too big, complex, and difficult, and sometimes impossible to say solely through words or even talk about at all. So I want to start in freshman year. I went to a college on the East Coast called Lesley University of Art and Design. And this was a time of dramatic transformation in how I used photography. I had been taking lots of pretty pictures of pretty things, as most people do, and there's nothing wrong with it, but that doesn't cut it in art school. I was making the kind of pretty images that come pre-downloaded to your computer and use them as screensavers, like droplets of water scattered across the surface of a leaf. We've all seen some version of it. I quickly learned art professors, they don't just want pretty, they want images with tension, juxtaposition. I just kept hearing these words over and over again. And I had been using photography as an escape. I was curating these perfect worlds. I think back to an image that I had of this beautiful woman romping around in a rose garden. Her hair was swept back into this waterfall braid, and her olive skin perfectly blushed with powder. And this fantasy wasn't going to cut it in my heavily conceptually based art classes. So I had to graduate to more serious subject matter. I had to stop world building surface level narratives. I had to dig deeper, and what came out for me was personally profound. I will forever say that I earned my first A in my college level photography classes by having my friend crush a strawberry on her boob. And covering my other friend, truly, she was a godsend for letting me do this, covering her head to toe in Band-Aids. A process that required an unpaid assistant, my other non-art majored friend who was bored of her gen ed classes in school, and a series of many hours. And again, this friend who helped my creative vision come to life and endured the pain of ripping off boxes of Band-Aids, I think close to 500 total in the process. A lot of money spent on Band-Aids at this time. Good thing for all those CVS coupons. So this project was a sentiment to my deep struggles with a complicated history of mental illness, a constant masking, covering up of pain, insecurity, and struggle to protect myself from personal and general fear of judgment. There is still so much stigma around mental illness in our society. We are quick to talk about our aching head, but not about the mental emotional basis for that headache. When my professors asked me for tension over and over again, I first thought of my internal world. I chose to focus on the complex relationship between pleasure and pain that had me spiraling into unhealthy cycles. I started to deconstruct and unmask some of these performances that I kept up and on guard for myself and society. So through these staged images, I was able to create new performances to replace some old performances. And I continued this project in my sophomore year, and I titled it Behind the Mask. And this was through my exploration of people, my subjects, dressing up in cosmetic face masks that you would buy from the drugstore. So masks are a self-care ritual to beautify oneself with all kinds of claims to plump and smooth and de-wrinkle. Typically, they're done in the privacy of one's home or bathroom. The absurdity of these masks was brought to light once they stepped out into the real world. And it was genuinely fun to have an excuse to buy some of these masks that I would otherwise just walk right past in the drugstore on my way to pick up something, quote, more practical, and also reflect on a time of my life as a teenager when I held a lot of insecurity and I used to spend a lot of time in the beauty section. So this really came out in this project. So you can see this is the actual mask. It exists. You can buy it at CVS, or I'm not sure if you can get it here on the island, but it exists. And this was a multiple exposure photograph. And this is a peel off mask. So you put it on, it's a liquid, and then it dries on your face, and then you can peel it. And this is a set of acrylic nails that I glued together and stacked on top of each other to create a very long nail that renders totally unfunctional. I don't have it in here, but I made a video of my friend who did this trying to pick up French fries with these really long nails, and it was really difficult. It was like the claw machine, like going to pick up a stuffed animal or something. So another important dimension to my inner world, I feel like I'm taking you guys on a journey right now, and by extension, my art, is my relationship to my brother, Scott, who I mentioned before, and who I believe is the main inspiration for me being an artist. I started this project in my sophomore year of school, and it has evolved to a storyboard of different images, texts, and artifacts, as you can see here. This was from the residency that I did shortly earlier in the year, and I was given a writer's room, which is basically just a cabin with a bulletin board and a typewriter that doesn't work, and a desk, and I was able to make a good amount of progress on piecing a lot of this together. And this is what I wrote back in 2019 when I started this project, just for some context. This series is a mix of written and visual pieces that speak to an interpersonal dialogue about my brother, Scott. There is a running dictionary of all the terms I feel define my brother as a 23-year-old adult, now 28? The math doesn't seem right. 4 years? 27. I purposely do not show his face because that image makes Scott inaccessible, and even as his sister, who has shared 20 years of my life with him, he still feels inaccessible. Dictionaries, though clearly read, can be difficult to comprehend. In no world is Scott easily understood. This project made me question and consider how I relate and have related to him. This dictionary acts as a placeholder. Definitions will be added, though the term of endearment, Scott, will remain the same. So a couple years later, I took up this project again, and have continued it at Alchemy, wanting to further expand upon it. And in my adult life, I reflected a lot more on my experience of being a sibling to my brother with a disability. And in my attempts to find a community of siblings like myself online, I came across this TED Talk called Recognizing Glass Children. And I'm going to share the first about 5 minutes with you, just because there's no point in me trying to paraphrase it. It's just too impactful to try to do that.
Hello. So the reason that I'm here today is actually because of something that happened about a year ago that I'd like to tell you about. I was on Twitter, and a friend of mine from the East Coast who works with adults who have special needs posted something that immediately grabbed my attention. And what she said was, when will comedians learn the R word isn't funny? And having a brother, a younger brother with severe autism, I knew instantly what she meant because the kids in my neighborhood made fun of my brother Mario because he was autistic. So I responded back publicly on Twitter, and I said, I know exactly what you mean. I have a brother who has autism. And as is prone to happen in social networks, I got a response from a stranger. And she sent me a series of private messages that said, Alicia, I know you don't know who I am, but I have a son who has Asperger's, and I have a daughter who's healthy, and I don't know how to help my healthy daughter. Would you be willing to share your story with me? And I'd love to tell you that my instant response was, yes, please, let's get together as quickly as we can. And actually my reaction was, oh, no way. No. Because my story is not a fun story to tell. And it's not a fun story to hear. It's not one of these things where my friends say, hey, Alicia, why don't you and your husband come over for cocktails and tell us about your childhood trauma? That doesn't happen. But even though I was instantly very hesitant, I knew that this was something important to do. And I sensed that there was a purpose in this. So we met. 2.5 hours later, we were laughing, we were crying, and I, in fact, did share with her some of the most traumatic experiences of my youth, and we have become wonderful friends since. She said something to me recently. She said, Alicia, because of your willingness to share your story with me, I have forever changed the way I parent my daughter. And because of that, my daughter's life is forever changed. And I thought, wow, if by sharing my story with one person, one child's life is forever changed, then perhaps by sharing my story with many people, many children's lives will be forever changed. Many glass children's lives. So, what the heck is a glass child? I first heard this term about 1.5 years ago, and I want you to know that I did search long and hard to try to find the person who originated the term, and I couldn't. So for now, anonymously, The definition of a glass child is a healthy kid who has a special needs brother or sister, a special needs sibling. And I think it's important just for a moment to talk about, at least for the purposes of this discussion today, what special needs means. You may typically think of someone with a mental or physical disability, and that's true. Those are people who have special needs. But today, it's something a little bit broader than that. A child with special needs is a child who requires ongoing attention and care above and beyond what we would consider normal parenting to be. So that could be someone with a mental or a physical disability. It could also be a child who is an addict. Perhaps they're addicted to drugs or alcohol, even to food. Could be a child who's engaged in criminal activity, a child who maybe has a short-term severe illness or perhaps even a chronic and long-term illness. This is how we'll look at special needs today. So with that definition in mind, I'm wondering how many of you know of a family that has a special needs child? And since I can't see you and the people who are live streaming can't see you, could you clap for just a minute? Wow. That is a lot of people, which is very exciting to me because that means that right here in this room, we have an army of people who can significantly change the trajectory of a glass child's life. So why glass? Why not titanium or plastic? Well, you may think it's because glass children are fragile and they break very easily. But the reality is we are some of the strongest children there are. We have to be in order to survive the things that we have survived. We are called glass children because our parents are so consumed with the needs of our brothers and sisters that when they look at us, they look right through us as though we're made of glass. That's what a glass child is. You see, we're very sensitive to the needs of our parents and of our siblings. And we love our mothers and fathers and our brothers and sisters. And we know that the problems that we have, the things that we face, are insignificant compared to what our parents are dealing with and our siblings are dealing with. So we're very quiet. We become caretakers of the family.
That was Alicia in San Antonio, Texas, where Sarah's from, talking about glass children. Let's see if I can go to my next slide.
Hello.
Yes, that's right. So I'm a glass child. It took me so long to come to this realization about myself and to share it, which still feels vulnerable, but the more I say it, the more that I come into acceptance with it. It is a radical statement to be centering the sibling experience. Beyond the disabled child, parents come next in the hierarchy of this space. Resources like books, podcasts, articles, and more for the parents of a disabled person are substantial and growing. Siblings situated within this unique family dynamic are rarely talked about. Society does not fully recognize the emotional weight and often critical role siblings play in their disabled brother or sister's life. So I can quote this TED Talk for forever changing me. It is a testament to the power of having words for your experience and sharing your stories. And this was a photograph that I made, well, it was made a long time ago because I was a child. I guess my dad technically made the photograph, but I reprinted it and collaged over it in glass. And this was just a very literal interpretation to how I was feeling after listening to that talk. So also at the time I was thinking about how I could have my brother Scott's voice, whether literally or figuratively through his different objects, come through in the project and my photographs, and how we could act in collaboration with each other. So this is a piece that I made that feels truly collaborative with him. I took his completed word search pages, which he completes nearly every day, He goes through many stacks of these word searches and spends countless hours hyper-focused on them. Or I spend countless hours, hyper-focused on them, and he also spends a good amount of time. And so in that way we were similar. And I was folding these pieces of word search paper into fortune teller structures, paper structures, and I pieced them together to form this lantern-like hanging sculpture. People tell me that it looks like a lantern to them. And I have a documentation of this sculpture that I wanted to share. And the audio that goes along with this documentation is audio of my brother's voice, and he's completing the word search puzzle. And the puzzle that he was completing, the theme of it is calendar. So those are some of the words you might hear.
And date. I'm finding date, I am. Mommy, I'm finding date, I am finding date. I found date, I did find date, I did. Flip. Fold. Funny. I'm funny, I did find funny, I did. Gift. Bossy. Don't illustrate, I did. Hook. Message. Buying models. Notes. Novelty. Office. Pages. Photography. Paper. I found paper, I did find paper, I did. I'll find pages. Post. I found post, I did. Motion. Squares. Sports. Sports. Scribble. Find scribble, I am. Spread. Find spread. I'll find sports. And start. Tate. Find Tate. Theme. Found my words, I did. Yes. Found all my words, I did. Good job. Found my words, I did. Good job. You did a good job.
So that's a look into Scott completing his word search puzzles. That was like a particularly anxious day for him, so he was verbalizing a lot of what he was doing, but sometimes he does them pretty silently. So this all feeds into my processing that I did at Alchemy. So this is kind of pulling back the curtain inside the dark room. This is what was happening during the month that I was here. I was making a lot of different stencils that I was then using to print onto different photographs, and playing around with exposure times of how long I would expose the paper, and masking, concealing different parts of the image, and using some objects that I knew that were very significant to my brother, like calendars, that's on the left side, and word search puzzles, which have been a subject of mine for a long time, on the right. And the word search puzzle that's there is one that I generated with one of these word search generator websites, and all of the words that I have on there are words that I have used in the dictionary that I've made for him, of the vocabulary that I feel makes up his life. So, and I completed the word search. So you can see our different styles of completing word searches. Mine is much more, this is just different, you know, our ways of tracing and circling. This is much more chaotic in my mind. And this is just a look into the pop-up show that we had a few days ago. I had this table that was interactive of negatives and contact sheets. Contact sheets is when you take the archival sleeve of negative and make it a positive by exposing it to light in a dark room through an enlarger. So that's what's on the left side there. And then on the right side, I have some of the objects that I was using in the photographs that I was using as masks. So there's a fidget toy, which you'll see how that translated into a photograph. I have some bubbles, some marbles, and the little cutouts of the calendar are also scattered back there. And I said, I am meant to be touched. So people knew that it was not only for display, but it was for play. That is the full shot of everything in the dome. So defining Scott in a book. So in working on my current project, I am making a support for myself and my processing, and also for other siblings, for other people who may relate with this project, and hopefully, if they can't relate to it personally, can appreciate it in some way, shape, or form. So these were 2 photographs that I made in the dark room at Alchemy. In these images, I was blowing bubbles onto the photo paper as the image was being exposed. It was about a 30-second exposure, so it was me just there with my bubble wand, just blowing onto the paper for a while. And it was actually a lot of fun, and each is a mono print, meaning it's like one of a kind. So these were just like 2 different results that I got using that process of blowing bubbles. And I was really astounded by the results. I think it was very playful and fun, and also gave way to a really amazing image. And then here are just a few other snapshots of what I've been making. You could see in the bottom row the calendar that I was using, the calendar stencil. Next to that, you can see the kind of worm-like line running through the bottom of the image, and that's the fidget toy. Above that is the word search puzzle that I created and then completed and printed. The one to the left of that is with the marbles, so placing the marbles on top of the marbles that were already in the photograph, and kind of repeating his action of placing them. My brother made that line of marbles after a game of Moncala that we played together. And then the one on the far right, yeah, it's right for you guys. Far right is all of the mark makings that he did while completing a word search puzzle. And it was done on a piece of transparency over the word search, so I could then use it as a stencil to print. So my time, hopefully I haven't been going on for too long. Or if I did, you enjoyed listening to me talk. So there's this term that I learned recently from a book called quarter life, which is what I'm in currently, recently 25 and going through my quarter life crisis apparently. And this term, psychological alchemy, translates to transforming the chaos of your childhood into creative and emotional gold. So I want to thank all the people that make Alchemy Art Center possible for inviting me here so that I could continue to practice this specific kind of alchemy that I'm very interested in and has transformed my life. And it has been a truly creatively expansive experience being here, being in the forest and experiencing all that San Juan has to offer me. So let's keep in touch, please. You can look at my website. I have a lot of really different work on there. I didn't really show a lot of like, I mean, I showed some black and white photography, but I also do black and white like landscape photography. So you can, there's a bit of what you could see if you went to my website. And I also have my email there if you feel compelled to reach out. And yeah, I will. My hope is to be completing a book this year. So yeah, keep in touch with me. And if you would like a copy, I'm more than happy to figure out how to get that to you. Yeah.
We have time for some questions and answers if anybody has any questions.
Yeah.
Does Scott know your about the work that you think about him, and if so, how does he feel about it?
He is not really at a level of like comprehension and understanding. Like if I were to explain to him, I mean, I have tried in a sense, like I ask his consent when I photograph him. If like I tell him like when I recorded that him doing the word search puzzle, I said like, can I record you right now? Is that okay? So it's like, even though I can't fully trust his answers because he's not totally comprehending what's going on, I kind of just lean into that he knows enough of what I'm doing, and he knows that I have like his best interests at heart, and that I truly want it to be collaborative between the two of us, and that I'm not, you know, like that I have a lot of care and love for him. So yeah, it is something that on Wednesday when we were in the dome, someone asked me, you know, how does Scott feel about this? I'm like, I would give you a lot of money to figure that out. Like, I don't know. But I just have to have trust in my process. That yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In what ways has your work, you said it's transformed your life? In what ways?
I mean, it's transformed like how I process things emotionally. Like having been through a lot of personally difficult times and having photography as an outlet, having writing as an outlet, has been like, yeah, truly transformational for me, and has like, I mean, like legitimately saved me at different points in time. So yeah, I mean, I think that's like overall like how I could answer that question. But I think like we need other emotional outlets other than just like using words to talk about our experiences. And so through whatever art medium calls to you, I think people have the capacity to do that and to process really like not just the pretty photos of the flowers, but you know, there's capacity to use art to process things that aren't so beautiful on the exterior. Which I think, yeah, a lot of art is like just pretty things. And there's so much like research around aesthetic experience and how like witnessing beautiful things is actually really good for us, but also the experience of like doing the art making is even more like influential to people. And like on a like 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 our neural pathways are like, there's research around this, how our neural pathways are being reconnected, rewired through the process of art making. So this isn't just like me being like, oh, you should do art because it's healthy for you and it does good things. I'm like, no, there's scientists out there that are doing this research right now, and yeah, it's like really, I think, going to transform our world.
I noticed this thread between something Sarah had said and what I feel about what you shared, which is like, Sarah, you said that often mothers feel invisible, but they like disappear. And so I feel like that's probably the experience that Glass children have. Like, I can relate to that because I'm the oldest of 13 kids and like the first girl, and then had a bunch of boys after me. So it was like, I wasn't even really a baby. It was just like, okay, now we have all these other kids, like there's another baby and another baby and another baby, and you need to like be our helper now. Yeah. And so like when you said that about your mom, like I feel, or about being a mom, I feel like that's what my mom experienced, and I, as a consequence, experienced that, and then also can relate to that being a Glass child. Anyways, my point is that I feel like when people create art and have a body of work, it's a way for them to feel like they exist.
I love that. Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, Maria.
I have a question about your book. That's so exciting because it's a book. And I'm wondering how do you see that? Do you plan to self-publish it, or are you going to look first to publish it? Or is that still open and in the air?
Yeah, it's still open. I mean, my hope is that like I could find someone who I feel is like has all of the best interests in mind, like mine and my brother's, and like find some kind of publishing group that is already like highlighting the disability experience in some way. But ultimately, if I'm like pitching it to people and they're like, this book is unimportant, we don't want it, or whatever reasons they have, then like I will self-publish it and just distribute it more independently. But the hope is that like someone will see the importance in it and the value and like want to share it more widely with the public. Because I think I said this like in my Alchemy like statement that like to my knowledge there is not a book that exists currently about the sibling experience. I've seen ones that are like geared toward children, like it's like they're coming into this like knowledge that they have a sibling with a disability, and it's like so there's that kind of really basic form of like book, but I feel like there's like a need in the literary community for there to be like a book of photographs and writing pieces that are centering this experience.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I look forward to your book. I feel like the format of a book is so intimate but also broadly circulated, which is kind of rare as an art form, because people have a personal experience reading a book, and it seems like it lends itself really well to like your content, which is so personal, but also like really touches a very specific group of people that will really identify with it, that have that like private time to interact with it, as opposed to being in an art show filled with people. It's like makes a lot of sense. That's really cool that that's what your direction is. Yeah.
I mean, it's also like I'm using the format of a dictionary and having these words that are really significant to him. How would you read a dictionary in a book form? So yeah, it's also like playing on that. Yeah.
I'm curious about a bit more about this psychological alchemy.
Yeah.
And I don't know, thinking about how that relates to your quarter life crisis. What sorts of things are you seeing are like in the process of alchemy at the moment, and what is it that you're looking forward to with the next step?
yeah, like personally,
Yeah.
like, well, I've been like saying to people that I feel like I've been in the midst of this project for a long time. Like, I mean, obviously this is my life, so I've been in the midst of it for 25 years, but like in the midst of like making things and like doing these writing pieces and stuff. So I feel like I'm at a point where I'm ready to close a chapter on this and like open up some mental emotional space for something new. So I think there's like that's what's happening for me, like in the psychological alchemy world. Like I see more potential for different areas of my life to turn that into creative gold, is what like the quote was. I think there's like all these nuggets of different things that I can pull from in my life, that are like outside of this one experience that I have of being a sibling. And then like beyond that, I'm like really interested in like how to help people heal through art. And so like that's fueling my interests in going to grad school and becoming an art therapist, and like working with people more intimately, and specifically like with photography also. And I see like a lot of potential with darkroom photography as a very like healing medium for people. So, and also it's a kind of a dying art form, so it'd be a way of keeping it alive. But yeah. Well, yeah.
Leave it.
Okay, I don't know how to say that.
Sounds so wonderful.
Thanks so much to everybody who came out tonight. This is our last artist talk of the season. But we'll be coming back next spring with a fresh cohort of artists in residence and artist talks. And we'll let you all know through our newsletter. So please sign up for our newsletter so you all know through the newsletter what is happening. And yeah, we just want to thank the IMA for letting us use this beautiful space, and all of our supporters in the community, and our funders for making this program happen. It's really important and special that this kind of art programming can happen on San Juan Island. So thank you everybody for supporting this in every way that you do.
Yay!
Yeah.